Hi, Gina. How you doing?
I'm good, Corey. How are you?
Good, thank you. Did I get that last name right?
Yes, you did. It was perfect.
Oh, okay. Great. There's a couple ways that one could have gone. So I
Yes.
appreciate
I've heard them all.
So, as you might have heard from the lobby there, I talked a bit about the background of divestment and what's happening
Yep.
with it, but perhaps if you could expand a little more on what that is and where they're targeting some industries right now.
Yes. So on the one side, we have investing, which is putting money into something. And on the other side, we have divesting, which is starving a company of the capital they need to thrive, survive, thrive, and even start up. And we've been seeing the divestment movement take hold in Canada over the last few years. They started at the universities, calling on the endowment funds of universities to divest from any stock holdings of oil and gas companies. And now, as you mentioned, they've moved on to pension funds, as well as calling on the banks to stop financing and investing in oil and gas companies. So at InvestNow, we think that's totally wrong. We should be investing in our oil and gas companies. We have some of the highest standards in the world. Our oil and gas companies are the cleanest. Demand is going nowhere but up. And we feel that Canada should be supplying the oil and gas that the world needs. And that's our main mission, is to fight against the divestment movement.
And I mean, it can be terribly damaging. I mean, if we just leave the markets alone, if they're non-viable industries, if enough of the people don't want to have any part of it, they'll stop investing in it. But this is different. This is intervening against the instincts of investors and trying to artificially stunt the flow of capital to these projects. And it can be very damaging for a lot of people and their pension plans. They might not realize it.
Yes, the returns on oil and gas companies of late have been exceptional, and by just wiping out a whole sector, that's artificially constraining a portfolio, and it's artificially constraining investment in a sector that is viable and so important to Canada, especially.
Yeah, so I mean, your organization's been doing more than just speaking to it. Of course, your site's quite deep with a lot of information on, but you've been giving presentations and proactively going out too to try and counter this sort of activity, right?
Yes, and our latest big push is to the banks. We've submitted some shareholder proposals, which I'll be presenting on in the next few weeks, and we're calling on the banks to commit to investing in the oil and gas sector, and to look at the things that they've committed to, like net zero, which is is another word for divestment, basically, because you're saying that you're not going to invest in oil and gas companies, and we're calling on them to commit to the sector, and we're calling on shareholders to vote for our proposal.
Well, that's it. I mean, if you can get to the shareholders, those are the people that are actually in the end of it putting their money in, and they want a return on it. That's why they're doing it.
That's right.
I think if senior levels of these companies are misdirecting what these shareholders bought into it, that's kind of inappropriate with what the goal of investment is.
That's exactly right, and it's you're not only taking care of the shareholders when you're investing in viable companies, as you said, and you're allowing the markets to work themselves out, so to speak, but you're also taking care of stakeholders, because the whole purpose of divestment is to stem the climate crisis, but that doesn't do anything to help emissions reductions, because the oil and gas that the world needs and is demanding is going to come from somewhere. So we believe that Canada should be supplying that oil and gas. And why should we be hobbling Canada and our economy and jobs and everything that relies on oil and gas to chase this non-existent, this goal of emission reduction, which isn't, it's not happening.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something that the divestment movement, I guess, kind of overlooks is that energy producers, oil and gas and other things, still have made great strides in reducing the emissions that they do produce. I mean, we won't hit zero, but they've done great advancements with carbon capture, with cleaning up oil field practices, and a lot of other technological advances that reduce the impact on the planet in general, whether it's emissions or even on ground footprint. But the divestment movement refuses to acknowledge that.
That's right. And investment really, it does foster innovation, because if you have capital, you will be innovating. You're constantly innovating. You're always trying to do better. If you take away that investment or that capital, then it means that we're starving the industry of innovation.
Well, and you've got, I imagine you don't want to get too specifically political, but a challenge with the federal government is giving a bunch of incentives to green investments, but it's kind of been pretty silent when it comes to our existing industries.
Yes, and the question we always have is, why are we hobbling ourselves? And meanwhile, China is permitting 2 new coal plants per week. In 2022, they were permitting two new coal plants per week, when they could be we could be the supplier of choice. We could be an energy powerhouse, and we're hobbling ourselves for no reason.
Well, yeah, and I'd mentioned Germany earlier. Like we've seen the examples.
Yes.
Any realistic economist is pointing out there's going to be still a growing demand for petrochemical products, probably for decades to come yet. So I mean, we have to face that reality. Germany kind of refused to face it. They put billions and billions and billions of dollars into renewables, and when push came to shove, they found themselves over a barrel, and they actually had to start burning coal again. I mean, the irony of that whole mess but it seems to be lost on anti-petrochemical activists.
That's right. And we just need to look at Europe for an example of where Canada is headed. And unless we change the attitudes and get our message out there that investment is key and not divestment, we will be following in their footsteps. What Europe is going through right now, they're deciding between eating and heating. The energy prices have skyrocketed. There's no supply, and Canada could be there to save the day.
And as I noticed on your website, of course, I mean, it's predominantly we hear about oil and gas, but this doesn't stop just there. And anything that activists could deem to be irresponsible environmentally or socially by their measure, they could start doing the same thing, whether it's livestock producers or fertilizer use in agricultural applications, or mining or forestry.
Mining, exactly. We're advocating. We started with oil and gas because they've been the most demonized, but we are keeping our eye on all those 4 sectors that you just mentioned, all the natural resources sector, which Canada is blessed with. We have an advantage by having all of these natural resources, and we should be fostering the national resources. We should be investing in it.
So this kind of all ties into that whole ESG, I would call it a fad even, but it's a destructive one. It's basically saying that our corporations, our businesses shouldn't actually be focused on making money, that their role is as some sort of philanthropists in the world with environment and social governance and such. But that's speaking of divestment, that's a divestment from the reality of why those places were formed in the first place. But their boards are starting to embrace this stuff. And how do you turn back that trend a little bit?
Well, we have seen a little bit of pushback in the industry. Vanguard exited out of a net zero, like a global asset manager alliance, because they realized that you can't just blanket divest from a sector. That is the antithesis of ESG investing. If you wanted to go that way, you can't just say, oh, we're never investing in an oil and gas company. You're not even looking at their governance standards, their environmental standards, their social standards. And especially in Canada, where our standards are so high, to just say, oh, we're not investing in oil and gas anymore, that is not ESG investing at all. And we have seen some pushback, in the US. The CEO of Jamie Dimon said to divest from oil and gas would be hell for America. And I would say it would be hell for Canada as well. So we need to get our message that divestment is wrong. It's not good for Canada, not good for Canadians, not good for jobs, and not good for innovation. Not good for shareholders either.
No, and even speaking to shareholders and organizations, have you been in communication, your organization, with elected officials or government bodies of any kind on this issue?
No, not on this issue, but we're our this first initiative reaching out to shareholders. We have been doing that, and we've gotten some good feedback that people will be voting for our proposal. So we're happy to hear that, and we're just going to keep pushing step by step.
So as you move, I know you got a petition on the go and a few other things. Before I let you go, then, where can people find more information on how to help, support this, I say, push back against, an unreasonable and destructive movement? Where are you guys based?
Yeah, people can go on to sdin.ca and look at our campaigns. We have a campaign for the university professors across universities across Canada to reject the divestment agenda, because they're pushing for their pension funds to divest. And they can look at our campaigns and sign on to our resolution where we say vote against divestment.
Excellent. Is there anything more you'd like to add before I let you go?
Just that, investment is good, divestment is bad. Let's not hobble Canada at the expense of a climate emissions reductions that aren't happening anyway. And Canada should be the one to supply the demand.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us today to talk about it and for your work and pushing back against this unreasonable movement. I hope it continues to go well for you.
Thank you, Corey. Thanks very much.
Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Without the CSSA, our gun rights would have been taken long ago. These guys are on the front lines helping to draft smart and intelligent firearms regulations and legislation in Canada, and more importantly, educating the public about how we keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. To become a member, it's absolutely worth every penny. You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99 a year for unlimited access.